national spokesperson Rick Tyler. He's from the Ted Cruz for President campaign. He was also a integral part of the Newt Gingrich campaign for President 2012, as well as running their political action committee there. Hey, Rick, good to have you with us, man.
Hey, John, I'm glad to be here.
Okay, let's get an overview here from the Cruz campaign. As you know, I was there, debate Wednesday night at the Reagan Library. I thought he had a solid performance. I thought he's had two solid performances, your candidate. Not really translating, though, in the polls. Why not?
Well, I've only seen one poll, and it was a CNN poll, and that poll had about 1,000 people in it, and it only had 474 what they call GOP leaners. That is, they didn't qualify those people to see if they were actually going to vote or not. So I'm a little skeptical of that poll. What I do know, John, is in the first debate, after the debate, we raised over $1 million in the first 100 hours after the debate, and then we went on our SEC bus tour, and that is a tour of many of the March 1st states that are going to vote on March 1st. And then in this debate, it only took us 48 hours to get to $1 million raised after the debate. And now I'll admit that Senator Cruz didn't engage in the food fight, and he tried to avoid getting hit by mashed potatoes, corn, and peas. But he stuck to substance, didn't want to engage in the back and forth on trivial matters, and I think he did that very well, and I think a lot of people appreciated it.
Rick, I do have to say that on that point you're right. I thought the senator did a really nice job of staying out of the kind of Animal House environment that the CNN network people, the comedy news channel or whatever it was, put up there. And I got to say, being there and watching it like you were in person, I mean, I was kind of shocked. I really thought that the debate Wednesday night would be a lot more substantive. I mean, they went on for 3 hours, which I thought was way too long. But then they said, they're doing it because they want to really dig into the issues, Rick. And then the last half hour, they're asking, what would you name your dog, and what would your code name be, and whose face would you put on a $2 bill? They were like ludicrous questions. What was the object of that?
Well, you'll notice that CNN got 24 million viewers, which is a good sign, and I think that's encouraging. And I have to think that many of those viewers probably didn't know a whole lot about Ted Cruz, and so I'm hopeful that millions of people got to see Ted Cruz in person. But what they did in the third hour is, you notice they didn't stop selling advertising, which is fine. That's what they're supposed to do. But it was under the guise that we were going to have, a substantive conversation. They didn't ask one question about the economy. I mean, if one thing's on people's mind is they'd like a little clarity on where the Republicans stand, each one of these Republicans stand, and how to create more jobs, how to grow the economy, what are their free market solutions to more opportunity, more innovation, and we heard none of that. In 3 hours, we heard nothing, literally nothing about the economy, but we found out what people's, Secret Service code name might be, and we found out, just a lot of different trivial matters. So I thought it was disappointing.
Some of us, after the debate, to be honest, were calling it the Clown News Network. I mean, I didn't like the way the Fox moderators dealt with that debate either. The way they went after Trump, I thought was just stupid. They didn't get into a lot of substantive issues, but this was worse. I mean, you're right. The fact that we didn't have one question on the economy or the debt, or the fact that we have $130 trillion of unfunded mandates, the fact that Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, they're going to be insolvent. Not a single question. It's shocking to me, and I just couldn't really. It was almost like they were trying to put on something that would entertain people for a longer period of time, which I thought really did the candidates a disservice there.
Well, and I thought so too. And the way they promoted it, this was going to be the epic debate of the century, and watch it, candidates, go at each other, and it was all sold as some sort of like a professional wrestling match, as opposed to a substance debate and what the future of the country is. And so, look, to whom much is given, much is expected. CNN was given a great opportunity, but they
No, look, I think they had a unique opportunity, and it was not truth in advertising because they sold it a different way. I mean, that's why I went all the way out there. So I was not happy with that. Now, the next debate coming up, CNBC, right? So hopefully one of these networks will actually get to some substantive issues. And I think when we do that, that's really going to benefit Cruz, right?
I think so, because Senator Cruz, he is probably, I'm confident, among all the candidates, is the best prepared to be president, because he has substantive ideas on how to grow the economy, substantive ideas on foreign policy, how to keep America safe, substantive ideas on how to we begin to start to balance the budget and pay off the debt and ensure a future for future generations. Senator's two young children, 7 and 4, and so he's got a stake in making sure this country is solid for the next generation, and we're not going to do that if we just keep spending our future and not leading in the world, cutting bad deals with Iran that actually ensures that they get a nuclear weapon as opposed to prevents them from getting a nuclear weapon, as the administration claims, a government that would fund Planned Parenthood and the horrific videos and evidence that we've seen. Of course, the pro-life community has been aware of this for a long time. These videos have only made very vivid and graphic what actually the abortion industry is all about, and yet we still are insisting that it looks like the Republican leadership is still going to insist that we're going to continue to pay that operation because President Obama says that he would vote any budget that doesn't, and so we've already capitulated. The Surrender Caucus has already given up. They're not going to fight, and they're going to just simply pass what they call a clean CR. I call it a bloody CR, continuing resolution to keep the government funded because they're so afraid that if the government were to somehow shut down, which only the 6 counties surrounding Washington, D.C. would even notice, but they're so afraid that that's a losing issue for them that they're just going to give up.
Rick, let's get to the Syrian refugees. We predicted this a week ago. Obama first came out, he said, we need to take 10,000. I said that would turn into 150,000. It took a week, and now they're asking for 185,000. What is the senator's position on taking Syrian refugees in when these countries in the Middle East haven't taken in one? The Saudis, Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, Dubai, Egypt, Israel, I could go on, right? So what's his position?
Well, look, you're exactly right. These other Arab nations would seem to be the likely place where you would put refugees in hopes that there would once again be peace and they could resettle. Instead, this administration, Secretary Kerry announced that we're going to take 100,000 refugees. And look, I just don't trust the government to be able to vet out, who are good guys and who are bad guys. We know that terrorists want to get into this country. It seems this would be an ideal scenario for them to come into this country. But the idea that we would take 100,000, now you're saying 185,000, when these other countries are taking little to none, it seems like an incredible double standard.
It seems asinine to me. It almost seems like we're just the dumping ground of the world, and half of these rich Arab countries, we fund them in the back door in several ways. Look, Kuwait, we liberated Kuwait. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Rick, the average guy out there cannot understand it. All right, I want to get to the nuclear option. We've got members of the House now finally calling on the Republicans in the Senate to get rid of this 1970-60 vote cloture rule and just go to a 51 majority. The 60 vote cloture rule is not in the Constitution. It was not envisioned by the Founding Fathers. Senate members in the 1970s made it up. Where does Ted Cruz stand on it? And why don't the Republicans just get rid of it?
Well, there's so many cases where you're right that if we got rid of it, some things would be a lot easier to do. But I think in the long run, it may be short-sighted. When you don't have the majority, of course, course, this majority is no better than the majority the Democrats had. I mean, literally, the Republican majority right now has gotten us nothing better than what Harry Reid has gotten us. But the minority, when you are in a minority, you want to protect the minority, and I would just be afraid of the scenario where if the Democrats gain the majority, they just run roughshod over the minority, and so I'm afraid it may be a little short-sighted to get rid of it. But it's a good question, and we should look at it carefully.
Well, look, I mean, I think it's very frustrating for people, Rick, because at the end of the day, we had this what appeared to be this monumental Republican landslide victory in November, and 10 months in, not one of my callers in Virginia can name one thing that the Republicans did that Harry Reid wouldn't have done. Not one.
Well,
and so it's very frustrating.
I'm not sure that's because of the majority rule, though. I think that's because leadership has failed to take a stand, and they have failed to fight, and they have failed to say, look, we can win these arguments with the American people. The idea that you can't win the argument of defunding and getting rid of Planned Parenthood, or at least not having taxpayer money go toward an organization that we now know does what it does. The idea that issue there, that they don't see that is a winning issue. So every Democrat would have to go home and explain, well, the reason we don't have your bridge built, the reason your highways are not repaired, the reason the funding hasn't come for these projects in your district is because we think that funding Planned Parenthood is so important that we've shut down the government, and that we're not going to fund any of these projects until the Republicans fund Planned Parenthood. If we don't think that's a winning issue, John, then I don't know what the winning issue is. And they don't think that's a winning issue, so they've capitulated, and they said, no, give them their Planned Parenthood funding, give them their bridge funding, give them all the funding they want, keep the government going just the way it is, as long as the Washington cartel is fat and happy and everybody gets paid, and then that's all we care about. And so I don't think it's a majority rule. I think it's just a lack of will to fight. But what the Senate Republican leadership doesn't seem to understand is every time they run on nothing, which is what they're doing, they lose. And every time they run on something, they win. So, and look, I would be a little nervous about giving the Congress an ability to do more, right? Because every time government does more, it does more damage.
Right.
So I think anything that slows the government down, and the news media would like to measure success, and the Democrats do too, by how many pieces of legislation you pass. Well, I'd like to measure success in how many pieces of legislation you don't pass, and how many pieces of legislation you actually get rid of, particularly in terms of the tax code, which is why Ted Cruz has called for a flat tax. And the reason the flat tax is so important is because it takes away the cartel's ability to pay off its buddies, pay off the lobbying firms, and pay off all the people that keep the Washington cartel and all the politicians who depend on the donations from the lobbyists and the special interests to keep them in power. And it's all in the tax code. And if you simplify the tax code to get rid of all the loopholes and just went with a simple flat tax, then nobody gets any favoritism, nobody gets any special deals, nobody gets any favoritism, and that's what the free market's supposed to be about. When small companies can't compete with large companies because they have lobbyists in Washington that keep them protected, and therefore they can't. The smaller companies can't innovate. I mean, that's what Sarbanes-Oxley is all about. All these pieces of legislation that the big companies love. They love it because it keeps the small business guy from competing.
Well, Rick, wouldn't it have been wonderful if we had a chance to debate the merits of the flat tax on Wednesday night instead of asking about some comment that Donald Trump made about Fiorina's nose? I mean, that was just infuriating to me. Look, the
first 5 questions were all about Donald Trump.
I mean, yeah, but they were not even policy questions. It was stuff that he said. I mean, it would have been one thing if they were starting a policy debate by saying, what do you think of Trump's policy on, X, Y, or Z? But it was all on comments he made. The whole thing was like stupid. Okay, I've got a minute and a half. Quickly, what is Ted Cruz's pathway to victory right now?
Well, one of the things we're most proud of is, we just named our 500th state team leadership, and no one is even close to us in terms of organizing all the states. So if you look at the early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina, we're in very good position in all of those. Surprisingly, we're doing very well in New Hampshire, which one might not expect for Senator Cruz, a conservative Texan, to be doing well in New Hampshire, but
right.
He is. So we have good shots in all those early states. But beyond the early states, we've now organized all the southern SEC states, really from Georgia all the way over to Oklahoma, and Texas is also a March 1st state. There's about 500 delegates in just those states from Georgia all the way over to Texas, and we've got those already organized. We're moving on to get Virginia organized, which is also a March 1st state, and then to get the March 15th states. So I think you'll see Senator Cruz do very well in the early states, but he's prepared a ground game to go on through March 5th and beyond, and we're doing a national campaign. We're organizing state by state by state. Organizing, living in one state like Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina is not a strategy that has ever worked. Mike Huckabee won Iowa, Rick Santorum won Iowa, but they went on to lose the nomination. So you can't win an early state, hope to cash in, especially in this compressed cycle.
Right.
The idea that you would win one of these states, cash in, and then get enough momentum to beat the establishment candidate is not going to happen.
No,
so you've got to be organized for the long run.
All right, well, it sounds like you're doing that. More info, go to tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. We want to thank Rick Tyler for being with us. Thanks, Rick.